everyone, welcome back to class. Today we are going to be doing the Toulmin practice via each one of the 4 texts that we have gone over so far. So I will try to timestamp it. I'm not really sure how that works, but I'll try. For each one of them, you don't have to watch all of them unless you don't know which one you want to write about, and then I guess watch all of them to help figure it out. If you do know which one that you want to write about, you can go ahead and skip to whichever text that is, and you don't have to go through this entire video and listen to them all. Before we start and jump into the text, I'm going to be emailing the general outline for the Toulmin satire essay to you, but I still want to read it out loud so that you guys have it, because some of us learn better when we hear things rather than read things, so I'm going to read it. So first, your introduction. Simply 1 to 2 sentences providing context from the real world. 1 or 2 sentences providing a similar context to the episode or the story text, and then your thesis statement. For example, South Park's main claim is, and then you'll list the main claim that I'm going to give you here in a moment. Next, you're going to work through the various themes in order of prominence. Which theme was the most obvious to you? What stood out? Each paragraph, I do want to make sure that I say as you go through each of the themes, you're not going to make each paragraph about these are the subclaims, these are the warrants, these are the backings. I don't want them separated. They naturally integrate with each other in your paragraph. So you're going to say, at the most, you might say a subclaim is the topic sentence to a paragraph in which you're going to clearly state what theme you're going to talk about. And then you're going to talk about the creator's take on the theme, aka what kind of support do they provide. Use quotations, pull details directly from the text or the episode, and apply it to said theme. And then you're going to create an association or connection, if you can, with the real world. And this would be warrant and backing, and sometimes it's just a connection. Sometimes there is no warrant and backing, there is just a connection. So you don't have to have one of these for each one of them. And you only have to use the words once in your paper. This is essentially how those terms are influencing the way you structure this. So again, each paragraph must state the theme, the subclaim, provide support from the episode, and make a connection to the real world. And you always want to connect back to the main claim after each theme that you've addressed. That might be 1 or more paragraphs. So not necessarily every paragraph should connect back. If you're setting up for a deeper example, which will take another paragraph, then you don't need to connect back before you give that example. Connect back after you give that example, after you've addressed each of the themes or the subclaims present. Some paragraphs will also provide detailed examples of real world that supports why someone would focus on the themes or arguments in the text. These would prevalent attitudes about said themes or arguments that are present. These can be satirical elements, like exaggeration and vividness, that help us understand how these themes are presented, and thus the attitude of the creator. So you should always go back to this is why the creator made it this way. And then, of course, rhetorical strategies that have been employed by the creator. So pretty much all of the technical stuff that we have been learning all semester, all of the rhetoric, the fallacies, the ethos, pathos, logos, the metaphors, the stereotypes and connections, all of these things are going to combine together to make sense of what this person is talking about, to prepare you again for Comp 2, in which you're going to be making your own arguments. Therefore, you should understand why they're structured the way they're structured. So that's why the analysis helps and comes first. Anyways, getting sidetracked. So once you run out of themes, you may discuss any lingering details or the miscellaneous that you have not addressed. Then you talk about counterpoints. Counterpoints almost always come at the end, unless there's a lot of them, and then they should be addressed probably issue by issue. But most of these aren't going to have a wide range of counter arguments, especially not present in the text already. So you're going to likely have to provide those for the text. And so, first, do they address the issues that oppose their viewpoint? What are they if they do? If they don't address any, you provide some. You should. Why aren't they looking at every variable? What would that do to their text and likely their argument? Make sure you address the actual reality of the rebuttal and then move on to your conclusion. It's here's all this stuff, however, but you should still believe this because this is true. That's kind of how an argument works, and so this is how your paper should be structured in a similar format to that. So in your conclusion, you say they did all these things, and they did this to create a call to action. They want us to behave differently, or criticize ourselves, or criticize other people, or essentially the main claims. What do they want us to take from the text and implement in our lives or be aware of in our lives? And if they do not directly state it, the text provides this feeling of a new way to look at things, and so you should provide what that call to action is. What do they want us to do because of all of what they've shown us, because of the follies of not taking care of our elderly, or forced equality, or suppressing other people, or being too involved in technology. what is the outcome from analyzing this text? The so what question, essentially. So that is the general way you're going to format your paper and the paragraphs in your paper. And now I'm going to jump into our first text. So Futuruama, Attack of the Killer App. The main claim is advertising has become an integral part of American culture, creating conforming consumers. That is what all of the other subclaims is going to help support. The context here for your introduction is going to be the original iPhone, a growing connection via technology, and possibly too close of a connection to technology as we saw it actually physically becoming a part of us. Subclaim number 1. Apple leads a smartphone trend even though the competitors have better products because they permeate our culture. And remember, this is analyzing the first iPhone, or the first two, right after it came out. And at the time it seemed new and trendy, but other people very quickly were able to improve on it. And now they're pretty interchangeable. It really just depends on what you want to use the smartphone for. But Apple led the trend, which is why so many consumed them, as we talked about in the analysis, the FOMO that comes with that. So support for them permeating our culture because of the trend is that the obscure underground music that's everywhere, the advertisements on the wall that reflect the real advertisements that they had at the time, because we went from the iPod to the iPhone, which is a big leap in technology. A warrant here is that we want to be part of a trend and we fear missing out. So that FOMO again that I was just mentioning. Backing to this warrant would be how much people are willing to pay, how long they're willing to wait, and the defaults that they're willing to put up with to be a part of the trend. All of those things that were wrong with it, the long lines that they waited in, and in reality, people, what were the real problems with the iPhone, the original one? How long did people actually wait in line? Days sometimes for the first iPhone. Use a source for this. Backing should almost always have a source. Okay. Subclaim number 2. Constant consumerism creates a throwaway culture. Support for this in the episode is that after learning about recycling and vowing to keep their old phones, the new iPhone commercial undoes the resolve really quickly. They throw away their phones and they get in line for the new iPhone, which they replace with the 2.0 model at the end of the episode. Very easy to see the cycle. A warrant for this is that conformity is painful. How do we back this up? Well, 1, we can connect to the actual pain in the episode. 2, how expensive it is. So it hurts our wallets. It can hurt us physically and mentally. Discuss the problems the iPhones have caused individuals. So you can link that to trends like the Jenner lip trend, and which hurt quite a few girls, or how much more social media becomes abundant and creates bullying. There's a lot of things that you can talk about with this that smartphones, constant connectivity has aided in negatively impacting our culture. Subclaim number 3. Technology creates a disconnect between close relationships. Support for this. Fry and Bender posting videos of their friends, their secrets and their pain, their embarrassing moments. Leela and her butt boil, Fry doing karate in his underwear, a professor setting himself on fire, etc. Warrants. We are willing to sell out our friends for a hint of fame. Backing to this would be, here's a really stupid example, but Stephenie Meyer's friend released a chapter of her new book, which was a version of Twilight in Edward's perspective, without her permission, which got them both great publicity, increased sales, all this other stuff, renewed fandom, and whatnot, but it ruined the relationship. So when we expose others and their secrets, it ruins a relationship, even if it gains us something for the short term. A little bit more money, a little bit more attention, a few more likes and followers. Subclaim number 4. Reality TV and the changing of media makes people competitive and do stupid things. See how this links back to the previous one. Support for this. The bet between Fry and Bender and their actions. Fry is jumping into the vomit and diarrhea from a board attached to the window. The warrant for this is the changes in format for social media and entertainment readily gives people the ability to copy or recreate stunts that they see on TV for bits of fame. Backing to this is what type of things do we typically tend to watch? Pimple popping videos, Jackass, Steve-O, the Cash Me Outside girl, do it for the Vines, do it for Instagram, do it for Snapchat, etc. Subclaim number 5. We are ignorant of our effects on the environment. Support for this is the representation of the third world and their environment. The separation and the rings of garbage and the piles of garbage, of course, when you get there too, in the air and the water and the wildlife. Warrant here is that we would rather not know what happens to our trash. Out of sight, out of mind. That's why that's a cliched phrase, is we believe that, or it's most commonly true. So backing for this warrant is how many don't think about how the air and the water is interlinked. We have traces of radiation across the globe from the leaks in Japan. Still, you can also talk about the garbage patches in the ocean. There's more than one, by the way. Any examples like that would be a perfect backing to this warrant. Rebuttal. Smartphones and technology have positive effects too, although we don't really see them in the episode. We can learn about the world, we can teach ourselves new skills, we can connect with our friends and families across the globe, and they make us safer, they are able to do more complex things for us, all of these positive things that you can pick a few, list them, explain them before you get to your conclusion. And so the last term is the qualifier, and that is that products with high visibility create stronger trends. And so this would fit somewhere up in the first couple subclaims, somewhere in there, but it should naturally come up as a part of the argument again. There is Futuruama, all the Toulmin terms for that. I'm going to move on. So the next text that we analyzed was South Park's Cash for Gold. So the main claim for South Park's Cash for Gold is that our ignoring or minimalizing our elderly allows others to take advantage of them. That's your thesis. First subclaim that I have, Alzheimer's and dementia affects everyone in the family. And this is supported in the episode by the family's discomfort with grandpa, how short the visits are between grandparents and children or grandchildren throughout. The warrant is that it's hard to watch a loved one suffer, to decline in health, become less of what they are, or what we've always seen them as. The backing for this is going to be sources that describe the difficulties, like the sadness, the grief, the loss, the guilt that comes with caring for a loved one who has Alzheimer's and dementia, because there isn't anything you can do about it, unfortunately. Subclaim number 2. We abandon our elderly and leave them lonely. So the support for this is how Grandpa is in the nursing home. The state of his room is great details to help support how lonely he is and why he, of course, transitions into why the TV becomes such an important part of his life. You can also use an example of the woman on the freeway as support for this claim because it shows a lack of care and her being all alone in danger, essentially. So warrant for this is, it is too difficult to care for our loved ones because of how busy we are. Backing to this is the numbers and statistics of elderly in nursing homes, the statistics of how many hours people actually visit their elderly loved ones in the nursing homes or facilities versus how many people actually keep the elderly in the home and take care of them, and what the hours of that like and the sacrifices that come with that. We most of the time can barely survive, and so we need somebody else to take care of our elderly so we can make money to afford the care for the elderly. Another cycle. Subclaim number 3. Loneliness leads to extortion. Support for this in the episode. All of the elderly buying the overpriced jewelry for their family members. The warrant here is that time is running out and they want to be remembered, which is why the loneliness compounded with the visits and the heirlooms that they buy are shown in that cycle over and over again. So the backing to this is that we all die. Most of us create wills or pass down our valuables to our loved ones. Whoever manages the estate is what that's typically called. And we want to be remembered by our families by the things that we pass down. So like photo albums or heirlooms, special jewelry, things that held meaning to us show that our lives had meaning and can be seen through generations, which is something that Dean says in the episode. Next subclaim, I think this is number 4, is that shopping networks use intense marketing schemes and sales tactics to exploit their customers. The support for this is a lot of the things that Dean says, a lot of the things that Cartman says, and even the Asian lady says. For example, Dean and Cartman's price drops, price comparisons, the creating false value, implied value, the colloquialisms like the prestige and the faux, genuine, craponite, etc. Warrant here. We love a good deal. We love to believe that we are getting the better of a corporation. So we also love to think that we are saving money even though we're spending money. Backing for this is how often do bargains prompt an action in customers? This is a place for a source once again. How do these tactics actually work in real life? How effective are they? Right. A rebuttal is supply and demand. As long as the elderly demand these items and are willing to pay these prices, people are going to supply the products to them, willingly take their money. You can also make a rebuttal out of the rebels, Stan and the slave boy, and the qualifier here is that this is everyone's problem. It is a societal problem. It's not just one person's problem. We should all be thinking of the people who raised us and who raised the people who raised us. Anyways, we should all care about our elderly, and that's pretty much South Park. Harrison Bergeron is next. Text number 3. So the main claim here is that a competitive or compliant society is not capable of overthrowing their oppressors. Now, you might have thought that absolute equality cannot exist might be the thesis, and you would not be wrong, but I feel like that note works better at the end of the paper, in that everything can be clumped into this oppressive society to prove that it can exist. So I think the competitive compliant society is really the main point, and absolute equality comes within that. So that is why I gave you that one instead. I think it's going to help the structure of your paper a whole lot more than starting with absolute equality. In case you had that in mind, I just wanted to clarify that. Subclaim number 1, a lack of intelligence equals a lack of rebellion. The support for this comes with Georgia starting to question the rules, but is continuously interrupted and unable to think through the end of his analysis. He's actually smart enough to analyze. Warrant here is sheeple. We believe that those who are blindly follow others and are easily led, lack original thought, are not really good decision makers in general. They're easily led by governing power and marketing fads, so that is the double whammy of the TV effect and the governing suppression with the handicaps. So the backing to this is how we have accepted all sorts of TSA regulations that are quite ridiculous and don't really apply to the terrorism that we are saying that they apply to. It's pretty much more invasions of privacy. Any type of invasion of privacy that is implemented by the government for our safety is within this realm. This is also a reference to No Child Left Behind and the Common Core and the indoctrination of our public education to believe in what the government wants us to believe. I mean, they're the ones who create the standards, right? So think about how we stand and pledge allegiance to the flag every day when we went to school. That is indoctrination. You are pledging yourself to your country as a part of your education. Now, No Child Left Behind. I want to briefly talk about why I make this connection and what it was intended to do versus what it actually did. So what it intended to do was to even out the funding for lower income schools. It was supposed to prove that lower income schools could have better grades and get better funding because they believed that if they had access to better tools, that it might help the youth and increase the economy and the standard of life in impoverished parts of our country. That was the intent, was to positively impact lower income schools to help give them more funding. Now the reality is because they were so ill-equipped and they had other problems that it actually ended up decreasing the funding to them because they didn't have the grades because of the systematic oppression that has been happening since the lack of income and lack of government assistance. So it actually skewed it all the more, and a lot of problems have arisen from that. I highly suggest if you talk about this that you use some sources. I am giving you a very rough, vague brushstrokes of the problem. Good intentions, improper implementation, much like socialism, which is most of what they're talking about. A lot of the times it's great in theory, but people who are in power like to have power and like to give themselves more, and so that's why it always fails, is because those who have love to take and take and take and take in the guise of giving even. Try not to rant. We talked about this already. So, next subclaim number 2. Forced equality is not real equality. Support for this are the handicaps, the examples of the handicaps and how skewed they become, how obvious it is that they're not equal because of their handicaps, and the visibility of them for all of society to see. And even Hazel, as the lowest common denominator, being envious and understanding that somebody else is better than her because she doesn't have any handicaps, and they do, aka the woman with the absolutely hideous mask being so much prettier. Warrant here is that we believe that we grow stronger from suffering. Backing to this, very obvious example is the ability to lift weights. You go through the pain of lifting weights, you go through soreness and all this other stuff, but that you also progress. This also has a lot of religious connections, so a lot of religions preach that strength through adversary. We gain a deeper appreciation for life, we see positive changes in our priorities, and we garner compassion. That's usually the connections that are made from suffering. Next subclaim. The power of TV and propaganda also indoctrinates citizens. So, support for this is how Harrison is described in the story as dangerous and ingenious and all those other things. That the TV is telling us what to think about Harrison. It is not giving us an unbiased view of him. It is a very biased view of him in order to create terror in citizens' lives. Harrison is a threat to their way of life, and they are to be scared of that change. That's what the government wants them to believe and how they want them to think and feel, and any opportunity to show us news story embodies that message and help terrorize citizens into inaction. So the warrant here is that we believe the news has to tell us the truth. As you already know, I've told you that's not true. Backing to this, once again, would be the Fox reporters who sued over being fired from Fox because they wanted to run a story on Monsanto, but Monsanto was one of the leading contributors to the station, so Fox would not allow them to run the story. And when they got fired, the Supreme Court ruled that because the news has to worry about ratings, that they are considered entertainment and therefore do not legally have to tell the truth. I'm sure you can also find plenty of news stories that were either exaggerated or there was something else more important happening at the time, but this one was sensationalized because of priorities and propaganda. You can also use any type of news story that involves propaganda. Any type of war propaganda would be an excellent way to exemplify this, or any type of political propaganda would be an excellent way to demonstrate this. They are pandering to try to hit as many beliefs as they can and convince us of the things that we're on the fence of to believe or sway their way. Another subclaim within the TV is that it sedates, it rules, and it terrorizes citizens, as I was just kind of talking about. So, support of this is the noises in the ear radio, being reminders of don't stand up for yourself or this is going to happen to you. So the warrant here is that the news creates terror, as I was just talking about, and backing for this is all of the focus on negative media or agenda-moving stories. Next subclaim. Competition is the opposite of socialism. Support for this is the references to the Dark Ages, the forced equality, and the looks, the talents, strength, and intelligence. A warrant for this is something called tall poppy syndrome and another social philosophy of crab mentality. We love to ridicule people who have more than us because it makes us feel better, and people are very willing to step on each other and to get out, and if one of them can't get out, then nobody is going to. So, very clear shows of competition in this warrant. And backing for this is, of course, the demonization of both capitalism and socialism in our media, in our politics, and all those other things. And there's no reason that they have to be opposites of each other, and they can't work together, that they can't balance each other out, because that's the necessity. That's one way of creating a complex power structure so that some don't have too much, and those who don't have can get some of that. That's what the socialism and the capitalism allows people to get more so that they can take to give it. Granted, in reality, right now it's skewed, but real culprit is the law loopholes, tax loopholes, etc. Rebuttal. Harrison is no better than Diana Moon Glampers. An example of this would be, during the time this was written, what the Russian regimes and all the rebellions and whatnot that essentially created Stalin during, World War II, who, by the way, was a socialist. They had a socialist regime, and people starved to death out in the wilderness because they could not get access to food and water. They didn't have anything. Everything was kept by the elite, like Stalin and his people, his dukes and his earls. And they also had bread lines, and people were so poor that nearly all of them, his death count from neglect and hoarding and greed, far surpasses Hitler. He was a bad dude. Of course, Hitler and Stalin and China at the time and Japan, they were all socialist dictators. So, just putting it out there. Because, when you have complete control of businesses, which is what socialism creates, complete socialism creates, then the government can just come take your business and tell you how much to charge things, and you lose all control. Laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is the clear cultural context that I'm trying to get at here. Also, a lack of competition means a lack of sports, a lack of entertainment, a lack of pretty much what we enjoy about life, what makes all the other stuff disappear. Guess I'm ranting. Qualifier. Absolute equality cannot exist. Again, excellent closer here. Alright, lastly, The ones who walk away from Omelas is your fourth option for the paper, and their main claim is that people make personal justifications of small evils for a greater good. First subclaim for this is the idea of good and pleasure cannot exist without evil and pain, the existence of dichotomy. Support for this is shown in the child versus the utopia and the rules of it having to be there, and what society says everything will be given up if we don't have the depth of pain, we can't have the depth of pleasure. So warrant here is that we cannot make everyone happy. This is utilitarianism. So backing for this is what happens when the majority, aka 51% of people, decide to put 49% of people in jail for something they don't like or dictate something about their lives simply because their opinion disagrees. This is a problem, which is why we don't have an actual democracy, as we've talked about. Next subclaim is indoctrination of the youth perpetuates the cycle of suffering. The support for this in the story is when the children go see the child between 8 and 12. The warrant here is that we create this type of us and them culture. And backing for this is war propaganda, the systematic oppression we've had of minorities, lots of examples of oppression that you can use because of tradition. Next subclaim. People would rather be comfortable than make personal sacrifices. Holy cow, is that true? The support in the story is the defense mechanisms that are related to the rules that they have for not letting the child out. Essentially the victim blaming the scapegoating that's happening is a support for this subclaim. The warrant is that our belief that luxury shouldn't be expensive, which of course allows us to exploit people because we don't want to pay for value. Backing to this is of course the child slave labor that we talked about for the products that we like to consume that make our life easier. So a rebuttal for this, now this one's going to need a lot of outside sources and examples, a lot of quotations is really going to plump this up because there's not a ton of subclaims here. So the rebuttal is, how can intelligent people do this? We're also not so free. That is why we do this, is because we don't have the freedom not to. We don't have the freedom to pay for value, so we have to pay for what is offered us. Because we all want it, the supply and demand again means that we are willing to take those crappy products made by slaves. Alright, qualifier. Can they actually be happy? Actually is a qualifier there. Can there be actual happiness? Maybe little bits of it, but not really. No, not really. Okay. So those are the breakdowns for Toulmin. Pick whichever text that you want to write about. I need the first 2 pages by Friday. I will grade them, get them back to you as soon as possible. I have really long breakdowns and structures and support already written up for this. I want you to try first. I'll take your draft on Friday. Wednesday, I will just be live waiting in case you guys have questions or need something explained again. You can always go back to the videos, which is a great tool to have for you guys because you wouldn't have had this otherwise. And Friday, we will be reading an example of a student's paper and watching another episode and analyzing that episode and seeing what he did properly and what he could have done better, as we were doing with each one of these papers. And then next week, we are going to simply be watching a movie. I'm going to give you the link to the movie. It's on Netflix, as well as I'll give you one of my free links. If you don't have Netflix and the free link doesn't work for you, I suggest trying the free trial. I own this movie, so it really sucks that I can't just play it for you guys. I mean, I obviously have access to all of these things, otherwise I wouldn't be teaching with them, and it just sucks that I can't get you guys great access to them. So it's on Netflix. It's called Equilibrium. Essentially next week you're going to watch that. I'm going to read my paper and analyze it, and then you guys are going to be done. So we're almost there. Hang in there. First 2 pages, Friday. Alright, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day. Stay safe. Bye.